From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. It is episode 400! Woo! Nope, sorry, misplaced decimal point. My fault. Episode 40, but that's still cool. It's still good.
We did it.
And now, broadcasting from our underground lair with our cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. That guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some pod therapy.
It's funny that you talk about the underground lair with what is it?
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, also known as chuds.
Oh, wow, okay. I like how much thought you've given this. You actually were ready to...
it's a thing.
Oh, it's a thing?
Yeah,
oh,
it's a thing.
Okay.
Chuds.
Okay, well, for our patrons who were with us pre-show during our staff meeting, they heard us talking about creating a cult, which is this whole fascinating idea that I have. So now that just lent itself to that.
There you go.
So there's our cave-dwelling friends that are with us with that. Welcome to episode 40. Nick, we're getting close.
We are?
We are getting close.
Close to what?
We started this gig the first week of January. We started our podcast. There's 52 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
We've been consistently doing one episode a week.
Yep.
Every once in a while, a bonus episode. And right around 52, I think we're going to land at the 1-year anniversary. Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
That's really exciting.
I mean, if math is a thing, then yeah, that should work out.
I feel like it's going to be fine. Yeah. So as we get closer to the anniversary, we're going to have to discuss doing some kind of special thing. Like maybe we could do like a fundraiser for a charity or do something that's like happy anniversary and people can show their love to the cause. But also my birthday's coming up. So I'm probably going to dedicate the month of November to some kind of cause and see if I can rally the THERAPALs to help me do something cool and dedicate my birthday to something. So that'd be a lot of fun. But we will start with interesting information. So, okay, usually in the starting block, we talk about research and we talk about new science and we give people kind of some updates that come out of the field, which I think is really, really helpful. But this time, I wanted to rip something right out of the headlines. And we don't usually talk about news, but this is meaningful, and I feel like we need to, because we are a podcast that does psychology, that does therapy, tries to help people, tries to advocate, and we may be the only therapists that a lot of our listeners ever meet, which is a travesty. I thought that that'd be a great patron reward, is a bumper sticker that says, "My other therapist is a podcast." I thought that would be cool.
That'd be kind of cool.
No, that'd be kind of cool. But so I feel like when there's newsworthy things that involve our trade and involve what we do, it's meaningful for us to step into that and have a conversation about it. And I think that we can bring some nuance. So there was a news article that came out about a week and a half ago that I tweeted all about and got into a fight with the nation of France about. And I think it's worth bringing up. So
how did I miss that?
How did you miss that? Yeah, probably because I got banned on Twitter. So basically, here's what happened. On September 11th, there's this French politician. Her name is Marine Le Pen. And she is the leader of their conservative party. And it's like a very conservative party. It's kind of the far-right political party. Now, Marine Le Pen was legally ordered by the government of France to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. And they did this because she sent out some tweets that depicted violent images of the terrorist group ISIS doing violent things like executing people and blowing things up and doing horrific things. So the context of this is that she was making those tweets because she had a critic online who was saying, well, your political party is no better than ISIS, right? You guys are just conservative terrorists like ISIS. And she was trying to say, really? Because this is what ISIS does. Like, ISIS does violent image thing and violent video thing. We're not them, right? We are a duly elected member of parliament, and we are real politicians. So that was what she was trying to do. But France has a law that prohibits you putting violent images up or overly offensive speech into public. So it's kind of a limitation on their version of the First Amendment of freedom of speech. There's a pretty strong limit to that. So the government investigated Le Pen. They've commissioned an investigation into her for this, and they've required her to get a mental health evaluation. So this is very meaningful because this woman, she's a political leader of a legitimate political party that exists legally in the country of France and has its own following and has seats in parliament. She lost in the last election last year to Emmanuel Macron.
Right.
Yeah, or Macron. Macron. I always think of the little desserts. Yeah, anyway.
Croissant?
No, that's a bread. No.
Macron.
Macarons. Macarons.
Yeah.
Is that what they're called? There's like sweets. Anyway.
It doesn't matter.
He's basically the embodiment of a human dessert. So Emmanuel Macron, he won. He is now the Prime Minister of France. She was his chief political opponent. She lost. And they have now commissioned a mental health investigation into her. They are requiring her to go meet with a shrink to be evaluated to see if she is unwell because of her tweets. So this is interesting, right? Because when I read this article, her response was, they are weaponizing mental health to try to label me as something. They are trying to make the public think I am crazy or unwell, and that my political speech rises to the level of illness, and that is not fair. They're weaponizing a legitimate third-party psychiatrist by forcing me to do this, and the whole thing is really suspect. And the government is saying, no, we're legitimately worried about you. You know, like you're a public figure and you have power, and so we need to evaluate you. So, Nick, this for me is something I want to talk about on this show, because this happens in France, okay? It didn't happen in Iran. It didn't happen in Russia. It happened in a true democracy that we look to for Western values and good ideas, right? And there's two competing discussions happening. One side saying, don't you believe that leaders in our nation should be held to a standard that if they seem psychiatrically unwell, we can require them to get checked out? An interesting point. And the other side saying, but aren't you weaponizing mental health to discredit your political enemies? And isn't that a slippery slope too? And so the reason I wanted to talk about this is because this just happened in France right now between the liberal side and the conservative side. Here in America, we're having that same deep conversation. We have a president. He tweets very big things, and a lot of people think very bold things. And the question of whether he has any mental illness at all has been brought up, not just by his critics, by members of his own party. And there's been a conversation in America about the 25th Amendment, which has to do with when a president is not mentally fit for the job. There's
not fit. It doesn't even say mentally, right?
It doesn't even say, it could be physically. Fit. But if they're incapable of doing the job, the 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution has a mechanism by which they can be removed from power. Right. And so there has been a debate going on in America about, is it possible to make the President of the United States get a psychiatric evaluation? And there's also now a whole litany of psychiatrists and mental health professionals who have now come out and are advocating that he is mentally ill and that something needs to happen, which breaks something in our profession called the Goldwater Rule, which we do not speculate as to the mental health of public figures because it's malpractice. We've never assessed them. And so I think all of this Le Pen thing, the Trump thing, what's actually happening in France is dynamic for what we do, for our trade, for our profession, and for the intersection of mental health and public government and democracy. And so I think the whole thing splashes into the middle of the room and is worth having a conversation about in the A block. So unpack some of your thoughts on this. What's your first impression of that?
I see both sides of it. I mean, I get that we need to make sure that the people, and again, I've said this before on the podcast when we talked about, I think it was like episode 5 or something like that, where we talk about Trump's mental health, and the point that I made at that point was, to me, it's not about mental health so much as it is about just the person's ability to do the job.
Okay.
So if you're going to evaluate a public figure's mental health, we shouldn't look at it from the perspective of they have a mental health disorder, therefore they can't be in office.
Because it could be very mild. It could be they have depression.
Or even if it's not, even if it's schizophrenia.
Okay.
The issue shouldn't be whether or not you have a mental health diagnosis. It should be, how does that impact your function?
Does it change the function?
That's the issue right there. It's how the person is functioning in office. Can they make critical decisions? Do they have the capacity to lead the country? Do they have that ability to rationally
that's the test.
Govern?
And that's fair, because you think about like the NFL football. Mm-hmm. There's players that have an amputated hand. There's like a all-star player right now who doesn't have a left hand, and he's a lineman.
Really?
Yes, and he's tackling guys. Like, he's taking down the quarterback. He's the twin brother of another player, and they're both on the exact same team. I forget his name. And there's also a player who blew off several fingers in a firework accident. But these guys, you could look at them and say, okay, you do not have the physical ability to play this game. But we choose to evaluate their ability based on function. What are the results? Right. I don't care what you're walking in with. What are the results? And so I can agree to that. So I hear you saying it's not fair to test yes or no, is there a diagnosis? It's correct to assess function. Right. So, all right, let's assume that's what they're doing. Let's assume that they're saying, based on the function, based on the output, based on the results of your tweets, we are commissioning a study to find out if you're doing this. Would you say, yes, they are within their rights to do that?
That's tough because it feels like anything can be weaponized politically.
Yes.
And I think that's the danger that we get into, because my initial thought is, yeah, absolutely. I think that's, you're in a really, if you've got your finger on the nuclear button, I think then, yeah, we as an American
So now we're talking
society.
about Trump, but I hear your point.
Right, but as any
people
of whatever society,
and you don't see like you're okay.
Yeah, if you are going to be in charge of certain things, and you know, that's a very high responsibility position. I think, yeah, we have the right to question that. Mm-hmm. But then again, it's like, I do see the other side of that too, which is like, you can make that argument for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, you can say, you know, so-and-so was driving and not paying attention and ran through a red light. Oh, I don't think you're capable of leading the country if you can't do that. You know,
yes.
It's like everything can be weaponized.
Well, and also pathologized, right? So like, in the echo chamber of conservatism or liberalism in America, one of the things I've noticed is that they tend to think of the other side as if they have a mental illness.
Right.
Like, I have followed some very charismatic conservatives, and they refer to liberalism as a disease. And they say, they call them libtards, and they say, you know, liberalism is a disease. It is a functional impairment. You don't understand reality. And I know people that see conservatism that way. They say, hey, political conservatism is nigh fascism, is nigh terrorism, is nigh religious extremism, and is therefore a pathology, and it's a disease that needs to be eradicated. And when you pathologize things, or we're so tempted to do it, it makes it so much more dangerous to let therapists into this conversation at all, because we are a weapon to them. Both sides are capable of misusing us and our powers to say, I need you to legal the president, or we're going to require that he go see you. And in just requiring him to see me, to be evaluated, is a political gesture. Or it could be weaponized all by itself, regardless if I release the results. So
then I guess it kind of boils down to, would you stop a good policy simply because
it could be
extremists could misuse it?
I think it would need to... Here's the way I would reframe that. I would stop a policy because it can be misused. Look at the Second Amendment. Right? I think it is misused. And so I would be comfortable addressing that. However, I think there's a middle ground here, and that's kind of what I'm fishing for. So what happened in France is the legal government of France just required a psychiatric evaluation to its own political opponent who lost the last election. That would be the equivalent of Donald Trump saying Hillary Clinton tweeted something that doesn't make any sense. She says that I am an authoritarian. Well, I'm not. I was democratically elected. Therefore, she has a break with reality, and we're going to go ahead and legally require her to be arrested and taken to a psychiatric hospital to be evaluated. And you could totally see him doing that. You know, he wants her brought up on charges, right? Yeah. He can't get his attorney general to do it, so maybe this. And again, we're not a political show. We are not taking political stances. We are discussing how psychology, mental health, gets stigmatized on social scales, and how it has a presence in politics and world government, and why it matters. And so here's an interesting middle ground that I think got proposed. A while back, there was an article in The Atlantic, and they were talking about how President Jimmy Carter, during his presidency, said that there needs to be a third-party independent reviewer of the president's health. And he believed that ought to happen to him, and he believed it should happen to every one of his successors. And basically what he was trying to create was a body that's insulated and protected from the political sway, is nonpartisan, and has a responsibility to call balls and strikes because mental health is really a thing. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't just be ignored. And they also have a commitment not to weaponize it or be silly about it. And so basically in America we have the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. CBO does not work for Republicans, does not work for Democrats. It is funded out of the budget, and their job is to score any legislative bill that is written. So if you write a bill that says, hey, we're going to change health care, their job is to do the math. Yep. And then to provide senators and congresspeople, based on the bill that you've written, here's the downriver results of what will happen in the country's economy.
Right.
And they just give you the math. Now, Republicans or Democrats may take issue with that math and say, no, they're wrong. But it's very hard to claim that the CBO is on one side. They're supposed to be on the side of math. And so right. Jimmy Carter's proposal was create a CBO, a Congressional Budget Office, of mental health. And basically, their job is to evaluate every president annually. And they do not release the results. The results are released only to a commission of senators whose job it is to evaluate presidential fitness. And they take that job seriously. Just like, there's commissions of senators on foreign relations that take that job seriously and they don't politicize every single thing. So what do you think about something like that?
I would be in favor of that, especially in the sense that... with the caveat that it happens on a regular basis. You said yearly.
Yeah.
Or you get elected into a new position.
Yes.
You do that. I don't like the idea of it being done based off a call.
Right.
Like, okay, now we're going to do this thing.
You tweeted something.
You did this. We're going to do this.
Okay.
Then I think it could be weaponized. Whereas I think if it's a regular routine checkup, like a physical checkup.
Right.
Then I think that may help mitigate some of the weaponization or pathology.
Yeah. I like that. And I like the idea of like a bipartisan group of senators, let's say 5 and 5, and they are the ones who can activate the commission. They're the ones who can say, we're activating the therapists. Go in there and please evaluate the president. Mr. President, per our rules, per law, you have to submit to this evaluation. Mm-hmm. It will be kept private. The results are not going to be public record. They are only revealed to the Senate. They are highly, highly classified. I mean, that is tip-top classification. Like, as important as the nuclear codes are, is the exact mental health evaluation status of the President of the United States. Mm-hmm. That is so intimate and penetrative, it is absolutely top secret classified. So only those senators would have access to that, not even the rest of the Senate or the Congress. And then all they would do is reveal the summary. The president is healthy. The president has been declared competent to do his job per our rules, and that is it. Mm-hmm. They do not speculate about his childhood or about any of the details of the report. Even the report might not even have all the details. It might just have a summary and a diagnosis and a prognosis or something to that effect. The president has mild depression. Prognosis is good. Recommend brief interventions and sertraline, sure. Or something like that. So I don't know. But when I see the French government actually doing this, the losing political candidate being required by government to go get a psychiatric evaluation because of her tweets, it's very prescient. Yeah. Here in America, that's like, whoa, that actually happened in another democracy.
Right.
That's a big moment.
And it's easy to look at this and from one side be like, yeah, we should totally do that.
Get them.
Because I look at it from the perspective that I sit in.
Yeah.
But then when you flip it around and we're like, well, using, like, as you said, the Trump going after Hillary with that, and like,
of course,
well, then maybe now I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way.
And that's something I've noticed on Twitter a lot, is a lot of people include me in things where they're saying the president's mentally ill, we need people to go help him or whatever. And I always decline to be brought into that conversation. Like, A, I'm not very political on Twitter, but B, I'm just like...
To be brought into the conversation. No one's contacting you to go assess the president.
Well, I can't confirm or deny. I can't, and just to be clear. No. It's these calls to action where people are like trying to get everybody to agree and go, right, we need to do this. Let's write our senator and ask for this. And I'm always like, whoa. I do not feel comfortable. The spirit of the call is wrong. And also, this is going to blow back. Every single president is going to be evaluated by a request of their enemies. Bill Clinton Now we have to evaluate him. Is he a sex addict? Is he, a pathological liar? How many politicians could be identified as pathological liars? And we'd have to go in there and diagnose them.
Well, then you brought up the point, too, of certain things being pathologized that maybe are not
They're
significant.
not pathologies.
Hypothetically, like if the Clintons had an open relationship.
Right. Like an open sexual relationship.
Yeah, that came out. And then
knew.
Then he can't be
The
president.
day he started dating Monica, Hillary was like, yeah, I'm fine with that. Just stay out of the press. Yeah.
Right.
Why is that a bad thing? But if a therapist is brought in to pathologize that, we go, okay, I've diagnosed it as thing. And then they go, well, he's not equipped. They can't be serving. The president should be at a higher standard or whatever,
Right.
So... No, but I think it's really interesting stuff. So I think, so I want to get your final statement on this.
Okay.
When you look at the mental health of the president and the unique discussion that's occurring in our society that involves our profession for the first time in a long time, our profession is very important in the eyes of a lot of people when it comes to the power that runs our nation. What is your thought about our place in that conversation? What role should mental health professionals have when it comes to the evaluation of the president of the United States? It's a big question.
That's a tough question.
It's a big one.
I think in some sense we kind of become educators.
Okay.
And, because I think now there's a lot more interest in mental health. It's starting to become a bigger issue. Like we've got people coming out and talking openly about mental health. We talked a couple episodes about Kevin Love.
They're owning it.
Yeah, and people are coming out and saying, yeah, this is a real struggle. So there's more people interested in it. I think now is an ideal time for all of us to become educators and kind of teach the public and be like, yeah, this isn't a scary thing.
Right.
There are times in which mental health can become such an obstacle that it prevents people from doing or from functioning in certain ways. But let's have an open, honest discussion about this. This isn't something we need to be afraid of.
I agree with that.
I see that's kind of the role that we play. Now, the other part too...
But no official role.
No, I like the idea of public officials, especially federal, going through an assessment process and treating mental health just as we would treat physical health.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I forgot where I was going to go with
that. But I think that is
is
the middle ground. And so I'll weigh in on that. I believe that mental health matters. And I also believe, and I'll actually take a little bit of a different view than you, I will not limit the evaluation to function, right? Because perspective matters. If we look at your schizophrenia and you're inclined to paranoid delusions, even if that subtly affects what you do, it could have absolutely huge ramifications. And so I'm not even going to wait to find out. I will make sure that the world knows. Or I'll make sure the committee knows. And then they are supposed to be the ones that have all the consequences of making decisions, right? That's not my job. But if the United States said, let's create an independent commission, nobody gets to know the results except for this little group of senators, and that's their job. It's top secret classified, but every single person gets evaluated.
Yeah.
I'd be cool with that.
There's a lot to unpack here, too, because then you have thresholds you have to talk about.
And secrets, too.
Well, but then also in your example, I mean, then you're saying, well, I'm just going to report what I see, and I'll let this congressional office decide whether or not that is an obstacle.
Right.
Okay, so in your example of schizophrenia, that makes sense. What if it's major depressive disorder?
Right.
And then now you're going to let congressmen decide how that affects their functioning?
Sure.
Then you're just pushing it off onto them.
I'm giving them the power.
Right.
And so the best, maybe you insulate it even further and you say, I will not tell this commission anything, not what was shared with me, not even a diagnosis if I have one. I will only show you red or green light. But that puts absolute power in the hands of a shrink.
I know, and that's scary too. There's no panacea.
Power.
There's
absolute
no
power.
Right. There's no easy way to figure this out.
Well, I feel like when I look at this whole situation, Nick, I become very House of Cards, Frank Underwood about it. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but it's about a corrupt politician who ultimately takes over the world by just swindling people. And so that's going to be my new goal. I think if I can convince enough people to give me absolute power to evaluate the president, I could do this. I could create a puppet government. The whole thing will be great. So,
well, I mean, the easiest solutions, I think, here are anarchy or monarchy.
Yeah. There you go. Let's just simplify it. We don't need all this complexity. But
I'm tired of thinking about it.
If you are out there and you are a THERAPAL, you're part of our community, and you're wondering, what kind of tone do you think would maybe be appropriate? My answer to you guys is this. Please always have a generous tone with mental health. If you weaponize it and scold politicians with it or use it as a cudgel, what happens inadvertently in your tweets and your Facebook posts is you might scare somebody out there who is going through that. And now they're scared that they're going to be villainized or seen as a threat because of what they're going through, and that a mob of pitchforks is going to come for them. So I just encourage you to always keep that audience in mind, even as you may be calling for something legitimate like evaluation of a person who's in power. Just always please be very generous and very sensitive to those who are suffering. And guys, my policy is always going to be I don't want to see mental health weaponized ever. I don't want to see it used against people. I want to see people encouraged to get help and not to be picked on. So even if they're a very powerful person with very important rules and very important, influence, I would like to see everybody get help if they need help, and for that to be a private experience that they can get the healing they deserve, because I think it's a human dignity question. So just like I think if the President of the United States was having chest pain, I want him to have the freedom to privately go get some support for that and not have to, worry about politics. So
right.
It's a complicated issue, guys. But anyway, I just hope our tone is always generous. I hope our community is always a group that people feel safe among. And that's the most important thing to me. Do you feel safe with the THERAPALs? You should, because we're very affirming and kind-hearted folks. And we like sushi.
Love sushi. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a listener asks if they're guilty of sexual assault. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Hey, listeners, did you know there's a cadre of mental health enthusiasts who help support this show every week? That's right, you can join them by becoming a patron of the show. For $1 a month, you can become a THERAPAL, a member of the official Pod Therapy fan club. For $5 a month, you can become a THERAPOD, a member of the dapper, sophisticated, three-toed reptilian special forces branch. Or, if you feel like being a hero, for $20 a month, you can become a THERAPRODUCER, a member of the Elite 8, who contribute messages to our show during commercial breaks and get a producer credit in their show notes. If you'd like to join the party to help make this show possible and tap into the special content for patrons only, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next question is from somebody on the other side of the Me Too movement. All right, so here we go. This is a raw and real letter from an anonymous person. Did I commit sexual assault? I'm writing today about something that's been on my mind for some time now, and I wanted to seek some resolution and maybe help some other people who might be listening. I believe it's likely that approximately 15 years ago, I touched a woman intimately without her explicit consent. In my research, the Department of Justice defines this as sexual assault. We were in a hotel room at a professional conference. Peers and I were hanging out after a long day, just shooting the breeze, and somehow I ended up laying down in bed with two women. One was a woman I had been crushing on for a long time. I don't recall if she was in bed first. I don't recall if she joined me. All I know now is that we were both in the bed. I remember spooning her. I remember placing my arm over her side, and my hand ended up near her waist. I remember my hand was in physical contact with her skin. At the time, I believed that we were cuddling, but now I'm not quite so sure. My older and wiser brain is afraid that she was terrified and embarrassed and didn't want to make a scene, or that woman did not give enthusiastic and explicit consent. None of my alarm bells went off that night, but I know that what I wanted to believe was powerful enough to silence all but the loudest of alarms. After the event, I remember reaching out to her. She did not respond. At the time, this led me to believe that she did not wish to pursue a friendship or relationship. Now, I worry that the silence meant so much more. There is so much that is unknowable, but I am re-examining my life in light of the Me Too movement, and I am terribly afraid of what it means about me if this was indeed unwanted touch. Part of me wants to try and figure out her name, find her, and apologize. I have the desire to tell her how dirty I feel, how no part of me ever wanted to make her feel threatened, that all I ever wanted was love and affection, and I did not understand how having a room full of people could trigger a freeze response. I was waiting for a no, when what I really should have been waiting for was a yes. But then I think about what I'm trying to get out of this, and what it will bring her. Even if I find her, will apologizing be for me or for her? Will it open old wounds, or will giving her a chance to rail against me be valuable for her? Do I deserve forgiveness? Is what actually transpired even something needing forgiveness? Am I just blowing it all up in my head based on half-remembrances and a need to apologize for the collective sins of men? I really don't know. I can't be sure of what happened. Even writing this out now, I can't tell if the memories coming back to me are real or fabricated or a mix of the two. I'm writing this to ask two questions. First, if you realize that you did something transgressive earlier in your life, what is the proper way to proceed going forward? What is that person's responsibility to their victim and to society as a whole? Second, for persons who have been victims, what would you want from your transgressor? Do you need your pound of flesh, or is there something that they can do or prove to you that would satisfy your needs? What do you want from us? Can we ever be forgiven? Signed, A Changed Scoop.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing in. That was very
brave.
Very brave to
bold, honest,
yeah,
completely nakedly truthful.
All of those things I was going to say, but thank you, Jim, for finishing my sentence.
Sorry, but that's no, it was. It was. Man, that's good.
Where do you go from that? I guess two things that were going on in my mind, which is number one, for the writer to find some way of coming to peace with this, and then for the other person on the other end of this, hopefully they found some peace. I mean, and we don't really know. I mean, he's writing in asking, was this consensual? Right. I don't even know. I never really asked.
Indicator light that it was a bad thing. He didn't hear anything negative, just silence.
Right. For all we know, she could have
never given another thought.
Yeah, she could have never given another thought, or she could have been on the other end and felt
wished you would have been more pursuant of her and thought you didn't enjoy her and so moved on.
Well, no, I mean, I was saying even maybe she does see it as sexual assault. We don't really know.
Both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it sounds like if you were a client of mine in therapy, what I would be working with you on is getting over and dealing with the stress that this is causing you currently. How do you go about working through this and coming to peace with this? With a situation that realistically you're never going to have an answer to.
Right.
It sounds like it's highly unlikely that you're going to find this person again, that you're going to be able to make contact, even if you wanted to. So this is, I think the pathway towards a solution for you is figuring this out yourself.
Right.
And if that means that you go into therapy and you kind of start processing some of the emotions, some of the guilt, maybe it means that you become an advocate for the Me Too movement.
That's good.
Find some way of giving back to that population. Even if it doesn't mean that you come out with your story necessarily, you could just be an active participant and advocate for women's rights. And there's a lot of different ways that I think you can go about this.
I completely agree. And so to the actual nature of the question, what I hear in this is I hear the writer saying, okay, let me play out a scenario that happened 15 years ago. I was laying in bed. It was a work thing. We were drunk, and there were several of us in bed, and I was kind of spooning this female coworker person who I had a crush on, and I got a little handsy. Now, what you guys can't hear is the author actually also included a very specific and detailed description of exactly what happened, which I think is important, right? Because the details of this kind of stuff does matter. And so he very specifically described exactly what the sexual touch was. So as far as how people's brains are wrapping around this, I'll give you the gist of it because I didn't want to include the details because it was very, very specific and very elongated. But essentially think of it as like grazing with your fingers genital areas, but not making skin-to-skin contact. Okay, so over the clothes, kind of grazing with fingers, that kind of thing. That's basically what he describes. So he's looking back on this and saying, okay, this happened. She seemed at the time receptive to it. But through the lens of Me Too, I am now becoming aware that what my male brain interprets as appreciation and consent and going along with this could be a person who's frightened and frozen and trying not to cause a stir because there's other people in the room and they're not trying to make a scene, but they're not okay with this. And so that's his paralyzing fear is, oh my gosh, what if that's what happened and I wrongly interpreted it?
Can I first just say congratulations to you for actually having that awareness?
Thank you for that. Yeah,
because I think
I'll tell you're on the right track just with that.
That's one thing that we do need to acknowledge. The fact that you're questioning this at all, I think, is a sign of progress.
It is. It's huge. So I'm not in a place where I'm going to speculate as to whether the action is sexual assault or not, right? And I think that that's important in this conversation. The key criteria when we're talking about sexual contact with other people and sexual gesturing with other people is we have got to increase our, and I guess I'm speaking as a male, but our, or anybody, but the pursuer needs to increase their personal awareness and their searching behavior. Their posture needs to go from a place of aggression and pursuit to a place of detection and attempting to understand and look for signal signs and verbal consent or whatever. So I like that you're pivoting over to that new mindset. I can't speculate as to whether what you did that night rose to the level of sexual assault. But to your questions of what can a transgressor do if they were in the wrong, if they did something that was wrong or bothersome or whatever, what can they do to make it better? I don't think any of us are ever going to feel comfortable saying and speaking on behalf of all victims everywhere and saying this is what a victim needs to see. This is what a victim wants to see. Some of them want revenge. Bill Cosby's accusers wanted to see him in jail. That was the only thing they would accept. If he sat them down and offered apologies, offered amends, there's been lots of rich and famous men who've offered money and said, hey, let me make this right. This is like a settlement out of court. I need you to sign this agreement saying you get it, you've received it, we're done here, you've been made whole. And there's victims who say, okay, thank you, but also that's still not enough. Like, I feel like I need to go ahead and take this all the way, and you need to receive an uncomfortable punishment for this or whatever. So it's impossible to know what the victim is going to need to see. There are lots of victims who the kindest thing that they would like is to never talk about this again. They actually don't want to see you punished. They don't want to see money because of this. They don't want to see any kind of retribution. They want to see peace and serenity and forgetfulness of this. Never bring this up again. That's the kindest thing you can do. So there's some people that are like that. So I can't speculate about what the victim wants to see. I'll tell you what I would generally encourage a person who thinks that they ran afoul of this to do. I would like to see you contact a person that you think you've wronged in a very specific tone. And that's not an accusatory tone or a defensive tone. It's not an I expect a reply kind of tone, because they may be frightened of you. But I think that there is meaning to writing to a person and saying, I don't even know if you remember me, but I remember this incident. This happened a long time ago, and I'm not sure if I was in the wrong, but I feel guilty for it, and therefore I feel the need to apologize. I think that it's a good thing to apologize to people. And, you know, in 12-step, we talk about this, making amends. When I was wrong, promptly admitting it. And in 12-step, we have a rule. When it comes to making your amends to people, we say, I have made amends to those I have hurt, except when to do so would cause harm. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting caveat that we have in recovery, that I want you to make amends to people, I want you to offer apology, and I want you to seek to reconcile, to make it right, except when to do so would cause them further harm. Now, in your case, writer, you didn't do a really big, conspicuous, obvious transgression. That's why we're not even sure if it was sexual assault. But there are those who maybe did, who in a drunken night did something terrible, and now they're aware that they did it, and they ask themselves, should I contact that person and make amends? And that's a very unique question, isn't it, Nick? Because you may be causing them further harm even by attempting to talk to them. And the writer talks about that. He says, if I do this, am I doing this for me or for her? Is this to ease my conscience? Or does this actually contribute anything to her life?
Right.
These are deep questions that we can't answer, but I like that you're asking them because it shows conscience.
I think that, to me, that's the direction that you, the listener, might want to continue to further explore and go in, is really kind of challenging. What do I need to do to work through these issues on my end?
Yeah.
So I can become 100%. So I can be my best version of myself, so that I can be healthy.
And it's a version of amends too. Even though the victim may not receive it directly or even be aware of it, I think a victim who, if they ever did approach you and say, you know what, you did this to me and I never told you about it, but it bothered me. For you then to go, okay, I totally know I did that. I fully accept that. And here's what I did when I realized this was a problem. And I didn't approach you with it out of respect and courtesy because I wasn't sure if it would hurt you. But this is how I did something about this in myself. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is still making an amends. We call that making an amends to the universe, right? To karma. Like, you're trying to tip the scales back in yourself. So some people will feel, Nick, the reason I jumped in with that is because if we say, I want you to be the healthiest version of yourself, some people could say, well, that's awfully selfish. Let's make sure this guy's not suffering, with any kind of guilt. Like, shouldn't he have the guilt? Like, do we really want to rescue him from that?
Right.
Not necessarily. I want it to cause change.
And there's also a difference between guilt and shame.
Good point.
Right?
Shame's unproductive. Shame's unproductive. It's not useful.
Right.
Yeah.
He can go through therapy. He can work through all of this stuff. He can deal with the shame, but he can still have the guilt.
Yes.
Guilt is okay.
Yeah.
Guilt is perfectly
corrective.
fine.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the shame that's kind of the issue. So, yeah, I mean, to the listener, thanks for writing that. I think this is a good start, and I would really encourage you to kind of take a look at what is your end goal. What is it that you really want to accomplish? And what is it that you want for you, and what is it that you want for her?
Yes.
And then on your side of things, how do you start working towards that?
I agree.
For her, it sounds like unless you're actually going to try to, hunt down this person and try to make amends for something that you're not even sure how she's dealing with it.
Right.
I don't know. That's pretty difficult.
And it's also difficult because whenever somebody has been through what might be described as a trauma, right? In her case, if I was her therapist and she was telling me I was at this work thing, this guy got very handsy, I was paralyzed by fear, I was surrounded by my coworkers, my boss was in the room, I was embarrassed, I was drunk, I felt ashamed, I felt like I put myself in the situation, I was tired, I lay down on the bed, the guy took it the wrong way. I could see myself as a therapist receiving her part of this narrative.
Sure.
And, her saying, I don't want that guy to ever contact me. I never want to talk to him again. This scared me, and even if he apologized, yay, I'm glad you went through some kind of personal growth and you realized that was wrong. But I'm still left with the bag, right? Mm-hmm. I'm still left with what happened and the event and the effect it has on my life. So I will consent to this whole thing being extremely complicated and a lot of unknowns. But the one thing that I think Nick and I are in unison on, an absolute must, is not whether or not you can go back in time and apologize to all the people that you may have wronged, all the jokes that you've said inappropriately in the presence of those who you shouldn't have said them in front of, or whatever it is that you've done, whether it was subtle or not subtle. I don't know that you can do that time machine action, but I know you can do something going forward. I know you can change tomorrow. I know you can change today. I know you can be a vocal advocate for communication and consent and a different way of living. And, listen, I'm a guy who's also very stunned by this. I'll be candid. The best thing about the Me Too movement was not just that it gave women a voice. It gave men eyes to see and eyes to perceive differently things that we think are very innocent and jovial and just humans being humans, and understanding that our actions, words, and behaviors must be understood in a global context of thousands and thousands of years of oppression. Right. And we're trying to understand that now, and it's scary for all of us. I know as a man, I have had to sit down with some long nights and ask myself, not did I ever sexually assault somebody? I don't think I've ever had that. But also, are my comments off color? Did I make a comment at some point
was
that
this
were wrong?
Appropriate?
Was this appropriate? Yeah, or was this or that the wrong thing? And just being very sensitive to it right now, which is good. which is good.
Right.
I don't usually arrive at conclusions, but I should be made to feel that discomfort, because that discomfort is purifying. It causes me to be a better version of me now that I am cognizant and thoughtful.
Well, it goes back to what we always talk about, which is that challenge is good.
Yes, it is. So I'm glad to see you wrestling with this. I don't want to rescue from it. I don't want to rescue you from the difficulty of this concept and the questions you're asking. I want to challenge you to use this to mobilize and become a best version of you, be an advocate for the future. And if this person ever contacts you or has words for you, that'll be your opportunity to make amends. Until then, you can only pay it forward.
Right. The last thing that I would say is, I think, start with something you can control.
Yes.
Because this is a huge issue. You got a lot of stuff on this plate, and a big chunk of the stuff on this plate you have no control over.
Right.
Right?
How
So
she
continuing
feels,
to focus on all that stuff probably isn't going to get you anywhere. Start with something small, something easy to chew, something that you can control.
Yes.
Start working on that, and then you go to the next thing that you can control. And you just kind of keep chipping away at it.
Yeah. And you'll feel relief from the guilt the more that you understand and see yourself as somebody who tries to make this a better issue for the world. And I think whenever you feel that dirt under your fingernails of you making a difference, there will be a relief that comes with your past. And that's fine for me. I don't mind people being motivated by their past failures to do future success and do kindness. And so listen to the writer, Change Scoop. Really admire the transparency, really admire the boldness. To listeners, whenever you hear somebody like this spilling their guts on the show, you might be tempted to put a mask on their face. You might be tempted to put the face of somebody in your past on this anonymous person. And you might be tempted to want to beat them up or get your pound of flesh. And I'm not going to sit around and tell you you're not allowed to do that to the people that actually wounded you. But let's be clear, this is not that person. Don't put a mask on their face. And, as therapists, our policy has been that we respond to the writer. And we advocate for the writer. They're the one seeking our thoughts. And so we don't beat them up. We usually try to come alongside them and find a way to grow them and make the writer themselves more healthy. So please always understand that is our context. And if you feel like we're being too gentle to the writer, you need to understand that we're not the police officers of the land. We're therapists. Our job is to heal the writer and try to help them grow into the best version of themselves.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, sexual fantasies and self-image. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Hey there, THERAPALs. ScoopFest 2018 is coming up in mid-October, and we are going to be there doing a live performance. But even more exciting than that is that we are meeting up with a few of our fans for a special sake psychology lunch on October 11th at 12:30 p.m. We've changed the venue. We are officially eating at Goemon Sushi House on 5255 South Decatur Boulevard. This invitation is open to any listeners who will be in town for ScoopFest or any locals who will be available as well. We just ask that you RSVP, so let us know how many are coming so we can reserve a spot, which you can do by contacting us on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, on Facebook.com/PodTherapy, at our email at podtherapyguys@gmail, or through our website at podtherapy.net. Let us know you're going to be there because we would love to see you and we want to make sure we got a space for you. So please let us know. It's going to be a great way to meet some awesome, kind-hearted people, and we hope you'll join us.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in about sexual fetishes.
Sexual fantasies and self-image. What should I do if my sexual fantasies, / fetishes, don't really coincide with who I see myself as? I have certain fantasies that I really enjoy and I like to role play them with my partner, but afterwards I feel dirty or ashamed, and I wish I wasn't turned on by those sorts of things. Just to clarify, the sex is between two consensual adults, nothing illegal, and no one is getting hurt.
Wow.
Sent to us from Anonymous.
Okay, so this comes back to a long debate that we've been having on this show, apparently with me and myself and I, about two different camps when it comes to sex. There is the AASECT camp, ASECT. They are a group of sex educators, therapists, and advocates, and they say never pathologize sex, right? You can go too far with that. And then there's the NADAC camp, or the APA camp, which is the team that basically says there is such a thing as sex being dysfunctional or pathological, and we're here to help when it becomes a problem. The usual test that I advocate for, Nick, is clinically significant amount of distress. Mm-hmm. What I hear in this person, I don't know that I'm ready to go that far. I don't hear clinically significant amount of distress. I don't hear that it's distracting from life. I don't hear that you're getting charges pressed against you and this is a problem in your life, or you're losing your job, or other big things. You tried to quit and can't, things like that. I feel a sense of incongruence, because what I like in the bedroom is not the kind of thing that I would be comfortable talking about in a Chili's with my coworkers. Right. That is a little bit different to me, and I don't think it's a pathology.
I would agree. One of the things I was thinking of when reading this, we're talking about should your, the fantasies and kind of your self-image, or how you see yourself. And, the writer is kind of asking, well, what if these don't really coincide? And my immediate thought was, should they have to?
Should they? Yeah. Yeah,
because
right.
maybe that's kind of the point of fantasies.
Right.
Is that they don't coincide with your
good,
self-image.
Good point. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that's a good point.
Our listener writes in and saying, two consensual adults.
Yes.
My partner's participating in this willingly.
Yeah.
No one's getting hurt.
Right. No
one's underage. There's nothing illegal.
Right. I just feel incongruent because it's startling to me that I like this.
Right.
And let's take a look at that. So the thing that I would like to impress upon the writer in this one. So as a therapist, if you were in my office, I would be challenging where that shame comes from. I'd be challenging what Freud would call the superego voice inside of you that is confronting and talking down to the ego and the id. You have these baser desires. You have this thing that you need to explore for your sexuality. Fine. But
Right.
you're being told that it doesn't fit because this isn't what a good citizen does, or this isn't who you are. So let's take something, for example. 50 Shades of Grey, really important erotic novel, came out, and it explored this concept of women taking physical violence in the bedroom, that they are treated aggressively and semi-violently, and it's in a controlled and consensual way, but they're getting to act out something. There's a lot of women that I've met that struggled with this because they did have that desire. They enjoy that. They enjoy the powerlessness. They enjoy men being a caricature of masculinity in this hyper-violent caveman kind of thing, and them being just incapable of thwarting that and being cool with it. And yet, they are strong feminists, and they're like marching in the streets, right? And so they're not comfortable with the powerlessness of females or hurting a girl ever,
right?
And yet they desire a little bit of that in the bedroom, and there's a conflict right there.
And that is cognitive dissonance.
Kind of.
That's kind of where that comes into play, where you've got these two competing facets of your life that are not incongruent with each other. I have this really strong belief system about feminism and all of this,
right?
But then on the other hand, then I've got these other feelings.
Yes.
How do I resolve that? Because they don't seem to click.
I agree with that. And so the thing that I would tell you is this, and I guess I only hesitate at the word cognitive dissonance because I'm used to using it in a negative context, not to describe. So I'm usually like, well, that's cognitive dissonance, so you can't do that. Those are incongruent.
No, cognitive dissonance is normal.
Okay.
We have cognitive dissonance about like anything in our
Everything.
life that doesn't fit with our belief system.
No, I agree. And so like, I when it comes to sexual appetites, I want to be really careful to kind of have a no judgment zone. Mm-hmm. So long as it does not cause a clinically significant amount of distress. In order to do that, like if it's an illegal action or something like that, it's going to cause a clinically significant amount of stress instantaneously, and it's a problem.
At least it should.
It's going to. Like whether or not it bothers you, it bothers society, and we're going to get you. And so, as a therapist, I want you to discontinue that, and we're going to alter that behavior. But in the sense that a consensual relationship is scary to you because it's weird and it's outside of what you think is proper and societal, I want to challenge that shame and challenge where those beliefs come from. One of the most significant things I ever heard on this actually came from church, ironically, because a lot of people think of church as like a no-sex zone and everything.
Yeah, my interest just peaked. I can't wait for you to finish this story.
You just lasered into my brain.
Go on.
Okay, no, this is a good story. So I was in a college youth group, and we had a pastor. His name was Matt, and I actually really like Matt to this day. He's a neat guy.
Why are all pastors named Matt?
They're all named Matt. There's always a Pastor Matt. Yeah.
All right, sorry, Matt. Go on.
So Pastor Matt was a youngish guy. He was in his 30s, and we were all, obviously late teens, early 20s. And he had been married for like 10 years. And so, got married young, neat guy. And we were talking to him about this question of like, is it we feel ashamed of things that we desire and that we might want to do sexually that aren't consistent with what our faith tradition tells us is proper. And he took, I think, a really interesting view. He said, I don't think that I would be a good Christian if I talked about and expressed the things I do in my bedroom with my wife. I don't think I'd be a good husband if I brought my Christianity into the bedroom with my wife. And he said there's things I need to be able to do with my wife that are private and for us that make our marriage better, make us healthier, and you know what? That has nothing to do with my faith. And so I appreciated it because he taught us at that young age how to deal with the cognitive dissonance. He allowed us to compartmentalize it and to say, you know what? Christianity has a lot to say about a lot of things. And this is not one of them. Like, you can go ahead and just do what makes you a better spouse. And so I think that that's meaningful because the standard he applied was what makes me a better spouse. He said the way I talk to my wife in the bedroom is not the way I'm going to talk to her in the pews, right? It's not the way I'm calling out to her from the stage. But the words I call her and the voice that I use and the actions that we have, that is a scenario we're playing out. It is a sexuality that we are expressing. It is nourishing to both of us. And because it's doing that, we're going to grade its appropriateness by its result. The result is good. It's good for us. It unifies us. We're healthier because of it. We're happy. Then do that. And so that was a cool standard I liked that he brought. And to the writer, I would bring that same standard to you. If this is consensual, healthy, nourishing, then I want you to challenge the shame that you seem to be imposing upon it, because I think you're falsely applying a standard of propriety to something that you're not supposed to apply that to. It's the same way if you were like, I like seafood. And I was like, well, we're from Iowa. We don't do seafood. Seafood's for liberals. Right, Nick? Is that how you guys did it?
Take your commie ass out of
here. Go back to Russia. And so whatever it is, but you're like, listen, I don't want to be judged on my appetite, right? Because that's kind of like an unconscious thing. I am not my desire for seafood. I don't identify as a pescatarian, just because I enjoy seafood, right? And the same thing ought to be brought into sex. I don't want you to identify who you are by your sexual appetite. It needs to be different than who you truly are. It's literally at the same level of whether or not you enjoy salt. It just needs to be seen as a taste, and that's kind of it. And if you bring it only to that level of judgment, I think you'll be a lot more free in the bedroom, and I think you'll be able to divorce yourself from some of that shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I no one's getting hurt. It's not illegal. It's consensual.
Well, if they are getting hurt, they want to be hurt, and that's fine. Like, as long as it's consensual and everybody's cool with it, so...
Yeah.
You do you.
Yeah, I agree. You're doing all right. You're okay. But thank you for writing in. I appreciate that. That was a good one.
Yep. Thanks, Mom.
That would have been funny.
I took it to a dark place. All right, so let's go to the section at the end of the show where we talk about apologies. I'd like to apologize to my mom. Let's start with that. Sorry, Mom. My sense of humor is more like Dad, and I apologize.
And actually, for those of you listening to this, we are actually recording this a week early. So we don't know yet what we're going to be apologizing for.
Yeah. So actually, let's change the apology to a future apology.
Future apologies.
I anticipate that in the following week, I will need to apologize to probably the Supreme Court of the United States. I suspect I'll be apologizing to a sports team or two. I strongly suspect I'll be apologizing to the Raiders. My Panthers are on a bye week, so I'm fine with that. One of us is going to be apologizing to the world when we have to change our ringtone because of a win or loss in fantasy football.
That's right.
So that'll be really fun to listen to and figure that out. So if it's you, I apologize to you, Nick. I apologize that I defeat you soundly and leave you with a terrible ringtone.
I feel pretty confident. I don't think it'll be an issue.
Okay. Well, then I apologize anyway, since you needed that.
And on to our announcements. Don't forget to sign up for sushi on October 11th. Let us know if you're going to be there. We would read off the names like we did in the last episode, but that was 5 minutes ago, literally, for us. So
in real time,
the names have not changed since our last episode.
Hello from the past.
Right. But we will, if you let us know, we will message you right back and let you know that we've got you on the list, just so you can be sure.
Yep. Looking forward to seeing everybody for Sushi, Sake, and Psychology. And remember that you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/therapy. And if you are on there, you already heard this episode like the day it was recorded, because you have early access to uncut, unedited bonus content, all sorts of goodies. And so if you are a patron, we love you. And if you're not a patron yet, jump on there for as low as $1. You can join the conversation and get all the extra goodies and be a part of our staffing and all of our pre-shows, where you get to give us feedback and give us ideas about what we should be doing differently. And we desperately need you to tell us what to do and not to do. It's very helpful.
This show needs guidance.
That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us on facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and now on patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
My mom is going to be pissed.
Does she listen?
No, she does. She doesn't, and I think she forgets it exists. And then she'll go through a phase where she's like, oh, I miss him. I'm texting him, he's not answering, and I hope he's okay.